Hi, everyone. Welcome to Question Period Rewind. I'm Donna Skelly, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. 1986, what a year. In Toronto, a TTC ride was 45 cents for kids and $1 for adults. Over at Honest Ed's, you could get a pair of pantyhose for 77 cents. And the population of Ontario was about 9 million people. Now, let's see what the hot topics were for the province at that time.
Oral questions. The member for Oakville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question to the Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, the Attorney General and the government will be aware that the Sunday shopping situation is very rapidly getting out of hand. The papers are full of ads for store openings, large and particularly the small, particularly the large retail department stores, intending to flagrantly violate the law on the forthcoming Sunday and Sundays right up till Christmas. The government has indicated they can't guarantee enforcement of the law as it stands. Employees don't know where they stand with respect to the provisions of the law and what the government's going to do. Government says that it's awaiting the Supreme Court ruling, sitting on its duff, awaiting the Supreme Court ruling, which may come this month, may not come this month. What is the government going to do to ensure obedience to the law in the province of Ontario?
Mr. Speaker, I don't regard it as appropriate to say the Supreme Court of Canada is sitting on its duff. The point is that the case has been argued. The case has been argued and has been reserved by the court, and I hope.
Order.
And I hope that there will be a decision from the court shortly. I should emphasize to my honourable friend, as he well knows, that notwithstanding the views of the Leader of the Opposition, who is on record in favour of a open Sunday, we propose to continue to lay charges and will in particular do so if there are any breaches on the coming weekend. And I want to assure the honourable member, as he knows, that any employee who does not care to work on Sunday and who is employed in a trade which is regulated by the Act is not obliged to work on Sunday. And I want to assure all honourable members that no jobs will be lost in Ontario by any employer attempting to force employees who do not want to do so to work on that day.
Hear, hear.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, by way of supplementary, the Attorney General well knows the position of the Conservative Party as enunciated in our report at the beginning of this year. He well knows also that the Leader of the Opposition would not advocate the breaking of the law.
Change the law.
Mr. Speaker,
Supplementary.
our report calls, among other things, for an increase in the penalties for violation of this Act. Yesterday, the Solicitor General similarly called for increase in penalties. The Minister of Community and Commercial Services called for increase in penalties. Will the Minister introduce an amendment to increase the penalty section of that statute, which I can advise him will receive support from this party for passage in one day? If he will introduce that matter this afternoon, he will have the full support of this party that it pass immediately.
Confiscation of property.
Minister.
I want to assure my friend, the honourable member, that I've read the blue volume that he brandished. His party, of course, is not bound by the tyranny of discipline, as was made clear, so I understand well that the Leader of the Opposition perhaps hasn't referred to it. I want to make one point, though, in response to the substantial question he raised, which is whether the penalties under this Act should be increased. It is a good question, but I have come to the view that it is not appropriate to alter the Act, and in particular to alter the penalties in respect of it, at the very moment when the propriety of the Act is being considered in the Supreme Court of Canada.
Final supplementary, the member for Brantford.
Thank you. By way of supplementary to the attorney.
No, I was never there.
The member for Brantford would like to ask a supplementary question.
Thank you. By way of supplementary to the Attorney, Mr. Attorney, yesterday both the Minister of Consumer and Commercial Relations and the Solicitor General, in their various statements to reporters, said that they felt the major problem right now was the level of fines. Does the Attorney not see that without touching the substance of the legislation or the form of the legislation, that with the agreement of our party, we could in fact pass interim legislation in one day to increase the fines, to see you through what could be a very difficult Christmas period until you have time to review the court decision and make substantial amendments? Would the Minister not agree to do that?
Attorney General.
I understand the helpful offer the honourable member and his party make, but they surely understand that as a question of propriety, it is not right to amend legislation which at the very moment is under reserve in the Supreme Court of Canada. Now, when the Supreme Court of Canada gives its decision, if it upholds in general terms the constitutionality of the law, the Premier has already indicated that that will be the time at which amendments to the Act of whatever variety are considered. I think it would be wrong as a matter of principle to amend the Act at the very time when it is being considered by the Supreme Court of Canada.
New question.
No, and I am.
New question, the member for Cochrane South.
Mr. Speaker, with respect to the Attorney General, he's wrong on what he just said. I have a question to the Minister of Industry, Trade and Technology with respect to the WIDA matter.
You heard of that before, Huey.
The Minister hasn't been particularly forthcoming with the members of this legislature on this matter. We've now obtained copies of the court documents, the application, the affidavits filed in the order of the court. Can the Minister explain to me where in these documents his ministry and his government has made any attempts to recover the $462,525.98 paid to the President personally of WIDA Systems Canada, Inc., or the $584,670 paid to Budgrove, or the $30,000 paid to Canadian Intercore? Can you explain to me where in these documents you've taken any steps to recover the public's money, that $3 million that you threw away?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as was mentioned, the firm of Pete Marwick are the appointed people that have gone in to have a look at the books. We are awaiting that report, and we expect it sometime within the next week and a half.
Supplementary.
With respect, Mr. Speaker, this minister obviously doesn't know what he's talking about. Pete Marwick was appointed as interim receiver with respect to WIDA Systems Canada, Inc., not with respect to Avi Dubzinski, not with respect to Budgrove, not with respect to Canadian Intercore. What steps are you taking to recover the money, the taxpayers' money that's now gone to these companies and these individuals? There's nothing in the court documents. What steps are you taking?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we intend to wait until we get the report back from Pete Marwick to determine where any disbursements have been made and why they were made.
Final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this is a continuation of the lack of cooperation and the cover-up of this government on this matter. We already have a member of the Premier's transition team personally involved in giving opinions and information to two of the parties that were involved in the original investigation by the Public Accounts Committee. We already see that that lawyer met with the lawyer for the Liberal caucus. And we also know that those lawyers as well met with the Attorney General briefly. Now, will you stop this cover-up and put this matter out to the judicial inquiry right away so we can get the public's money back?
Here, here.
There is no cover-up. This government took action over the weekend when it was felt that it needed to take such action because the firm in question would not cooperate with the requests that were made by the Public Accounts Committee.
New question. New question, the member for York South.
Speaker, I have a question for the Premier. I wonder if the Premier can tell us why his government continues to allow the trade in nursing home beds and, in effect, the trade in nursing home patients and the forced relocation of nursing home patients in the province of Ontario when there is study after study that documents that people die as a result of forced relocation. There are studies that show that people die as a result of forced relocation, yet that is precisely what your government is condoning. Why are you doing it?
Premier?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I regret the Minister of Health is not here to discuss the issue that you've raised here today. I certainly bring all your concerns to his particular attention. And if you have specific concerns, I hope you'll raise them here in the House.
Supplementary?
Mr. Speaker, the Premier can mumble his way out of this one if he wants to, but he can't. People are dying as a result of forced relocations, and your government is condoning the practice. Your government is doing nothing to stop the trade in nursing home beds. Mr. Speaker, the question I have for the Premier, this question was raised with the Minister of Health on November the 12th with respect to a home in St. Thomas. I am raising it today with respect to a home in Tavistock owned by Crescent Care. I'd like to ask the Premier, why is this trade in nursing home patients and beds going on when we know that it kills people?
I apologize to the honourable member, but I'm not familiar with the particular home that you raise or the particular instances that I gather you are referring to. As I told you before, I'll discuss this with the Minister of Health and get back to you with the details.
Final supplementary, the member for Windsor Riverside.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd suggest to the Premier that this matter is extremely serious, and your Minister of Health has not responded to the case in St. Thomas that involved a nursing home as well as Crescent Care, who bought the one nursing home and forced the residents to move to their other nursing home, eliminating competition, and will kill people because of the transfer. And the same thing is now happening in Woodstock, and Crescent Care is involved again. I'd like to ask the Premier to talk to his Minister of Health and suggest that they put in place the policy that says we're not going to allow monopolies in regions, and we're not going to force old people to move from one nursing home to another without consultation of the residents or the resident's family.
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, to the honourable member, I'll certainly discuss with him the issues the matter you and your leader have raised in this House. I'm not familiar, I apologize, with the specifics of your question, but I'll certainly discuss it with the Minister, and we'll report back to you.
New question, the member for York South.
Speaker, a question to the Premier about the Goodyear closing. I wonder if the Premier can explain why his Minister of Labour would state in this House and his Minister of Industry and Trade would state in the House that legislation is being considered when in fact no legislation has been brought before Cabinet, or as we understand it, any committees of Cabinet.
Premier, how do you know what's before Cabinet? I mean, I know you like to take credit for everything that's coming along, but how do you know what's being discussed in that matter? As you know, there's a suggestion it should go before a committee of this House, and it's something we completely agree with. I gather there was a resolution to discuss this, and I gather the House leader suggested that this should be discussed at the Economic Affairs Committee, something that we completely approve of.
Supplementary?
This isn't good enough. Your Minister of Labour has said that law could force firms to justify layoffs, Rise says, an article appearing in today's Toronto Star. And yet at the same time, it is perfectly clear, and the Minister himself has admitted it, that no legislation is before Cabinet, no legislation is before a committee of Cabinet. Why would your Minister of Labour go outside, tell the workers at Goodyear that legislation is being contemplated, when, on your own admission, it's not being contemplated?
Premier?
He's a great talker.
Oh, why don't you ask him? He's right here. Why don't you ask him the question? He's the one you're quoting. I'm happy if you'd ask it to him.
Supplementary to the Premier?
I'm asking the Premier of this province to deal with an issue that affects thousands of workers in this province who are being screwed around by a government and by a Minister of Labour who doesn't care about them, and by a Premier who would rather be flipped than answer the questions that are put to him. I'd like you to answer this question. When are we going to see legislation that is finally going to protect working people in this province instead of allowing corporations to continue to rip them off day in and day out in the province of Ontario?
I know my honourable friend would rather shout than solve some of these problems. I can tell you that the ministries have been very active in that particular situation. Well, that they have been. There's been a lot of work going on. A lot of alternatives are being explored in this particular situation. If you're recommending that we bring in legislation to prevent, to say no plant can close in this province, probably that's not going to happen. That's rather unrealistic in the circumstances, but there's a great deal of work that's going on to try to find a constructive solution. Now, whether that can be found or not, I cannot tell the honourable member at this time. But if you'd like to, instruct your members to bring it in front of the Economic Affairs Committee, and you can have a thorough review of the situation. And certainly, we're very happy with that alternative.
New question? New question? The member for Brantford.
Mr. Speaker, my question is also to the Minister of Industry, Trade and Technology. Mr. Minister, you would have us believe in the WIDA affair that your government and your ministry are making serious and determined efforts to get to the bottom of this, to find Mr. Dubzinski and see where the money is. Would the minister share with the House how it is that 2 daily newspapers in this city could find out where Mr. Dubzinski is, and by his own confession, his intention not to return to the province of Ontario, how it is that the press could find all this out and lay it out, and you and your officials have been completely incapable of doing likewise? Does the minister not see that this points again to the necessity for a public inquiry into this matter?
Great. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are aware that Mr. Dubzinski was in Israel, but he has chosen to deal with us through his lawyer, and of course that dealing has been going on back and forth. You are likely also aware that the Public Accounts Committee met, the provincial auditor and the ODC people met with him personally on November the 12th, and certain information that you had required or asked for was asked for at that time. There was a subsequent meeting on November the 20th, and that information was still not forthcoming, but he chose to have the lawyers deal with us at that time. Because that information was not forthcoming either to the Public Accounts Committee or to us, we did bring the receivers in on Monday.
Supplementary?
If supplementary, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the minister's efforts are well intended. But does he not understand that when the Public Accounts Committee asked for an audit in this affair in September, and cooperation in that regard was not forthcoming from your ministry, when we know that this case goes to the very heart of the government, that your executive assistant met with officials of this company at one time, that the Attorney General was involved in one meeting regarding this affair, do you not see that your government cannot itself investigate this matter, that it has to go outside of the government to a justice where it can be impartially and properly judged?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think there are several moves that have been taken in this particular case. First of all, the Public Accounts Committee was investigating it. Secondly, Mr. Bedell has been appointed by this government to examine it. And now we have placed in Pete Marwick to also have a look at it. And pending the results of that, we will take further action.
New question, the member for Hamilton East.
I have a question of the Minister of Labour with some reservations. In lockstep with other malls and shopping centres around the province, Cadillac Fairview has now sent around forms to all the tenants of the huge Lime Ridge Mall in Hamilton, informing them that they'll be open on Sunday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and requiring them to sign the form. If charged, it's the individual tenant's responsibility. This greed on the part of a few puts great pressure on the individual tenants and workers. And can the minister tell the individual owner and the employee on salary currently working 48 hours a week, who now has to work Sunday as well, what recourse he or she has if they don't want to work Sunday? And maybe some details, because what the Attorney General said isn't worth the powder to blow it to hell.
Well,
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'll deal only in terms of the workers, and I think Mr. Speaker, the Attorney General has put the point quite properly. The opening of any establishment covered under the Act is quite illegal, and indeed it is also illegal for workers, and workers also face the possibility of being charged. And so we expect that no worker will be forced to work on this Sunday or any other Sunday, where the worker would be placed at risk in terms of prosecutions as a result of working.
Supplementary.
You won't protect them. That answer is not going to be give a lot of heart to the workers that are involved, Mr. Minister. Is this government not prepared now to show some immediate leadership and act now with much tougher legislation regarding store closing, including substantially higher fines so that it's not a mere license, which is all it is at present, and clearly outline the right of workers in retail operations to a day of rest and proper hours? In other words, Mr. Minister, will you start giving the thousands of workers in the retail industry the same kind of break that we give a few of the big money boys so easily today in terms of the chains when they want to open?
Minister.
Well, Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't think the honourable member will be surprised when I simply refer to the answer that has been quite properly given by my colleague in the House earlier, in which he indicated that the appropriate time to move in terms of any amendments to this Act, any amendments to the Act would come after the Supreme Court renders its decision, and that indeed the Premier has indicated some time ago that any amendments that this government might contemplate for the legislature's consideration would come at that time.
New question, the member for Sarnia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A question for the Minister of Industry, Trade and Technology. Mr. Minister, as you're probably aware, in October of this year there were 5,200 layoffs that took place in Northern Ontario. With only 9.2% of the population of this province, Northern Ontario has been experiencing, on a continuing basis, about 25% of all of the layoffs that are occurring in Ontario. Could the Minister perhaps share with me and with the members of this House what steps he has in mind on both a short and a long-term basis to create the needed and necessary jobs in Northern Ontario?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that during the term of your government, the unemployment rates were also very high and sometimes even higher. But I would say to you that you should have noticed over the last 6 months the different steps that our government has taken in the way of, first of all, a very important move, I believe, was appointing an assistant deputy minister of industry to look to help to bring secondary industry from there. We have also moved many parts of ministries to that part. We have put out money in NODC through the Northern Development Fund and in many other areas to try to generate jobs in the North.
Mr. Speaker, it may be well to remind the Minister that the relative unemployment rate at the time that another government was in office was even far more attractive and far more appealing than what you've been able to achieve, sir. Because at that time, unemployment was far higher right across the entire country. What are you going to do about the 15.5% unemployment rate in Sault Ste. Marie? What are you going to do about places like Terrace Bay with 65 recent layoffs, or Wawa, or to the former Minister of Northern Affairs, what are you going to do about LeCoeur's Lumber in Hearst that have just laid off 35 people? What plan of action have you got other than to paper the entire North with your press release?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, through you to the member, we have made some very important moves to help create jobs in the North, and we will continue in our hard work to do just that.
Order. If many of the members wouldn't mind, order. There are other members who would like to ask questions. Well, I'll just wait.
Okay. How's that?
Order. How long do we have to wait before some other members can ask questions? Order. New question, the member for Scarborough West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Community and Social Services. And it basically is this, Mr. Minister. Can you tell us how many people who have been on provincial assistance that you believe will be stripped of their provincial drug cards by your government because of increases in federal programs for widows, spouses, and the disabled?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I presume that the honourable member is referring to those people who are now going to be funded through federal programs as opposed to provincial programs. One that comes to mind immediately are the seniors who are now 60 and were previously on our program but are going on the federal program. We understood that in some cases, and I want to underline that in some cases, they would not be as well off under the federal program as under ours, and in those particular cases we allowed them to retain the benefits that were available to them under the federal program. But overall, the increase was something in the neighborhood of about $130 a month, and therefore most of them, in fact, would be better off under the federal program, and that's why they're transferring to it.
Supplementary?
I have no doubt why they're transferring to it. The question is why you're not providing them with drug cards. As the Minister will know, women eligible for widow spouse's allowance since September 1st, 1985 have been cut off eligibility for your drug cards. And as of January 1st, with the maximum CPP disability going up, it'll be just slightly higher than the maximum for FBA, and therefore all those disabled people at the maximum of a large $635 a month will also not be available for your drug card. Why are you making the government's largesse at the federal level, making you cheap at this level and not providing the drug cards that these people need and deserve?
Right on, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member perhaps didn't appreciate the fact that in terms of total dollars available to them and in terms of the cost of the medicine that they require, they can be better off under the federal program. Now, if that's not the case, as I said, in some cases they're being left on the provincial benefits program, and secondly, they can be put back on the provincial program if a special need is determined and their costs are above and beyond what they're going to receive before. So there are options available.
New question. The member for Carleton Grenville.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I have a question for the Attorney General. I understand, Mr. Attorney General, that you have now received the report from the Metropolitan Toronto Police on their investigation of your colleague, the Solicitor General. Will you table that report this afternoon so that all members of this legislature can see the results of that investigation?
Minister?
What I will do, I haven't seen the report because I've been in the building, not in the office today. When I go back to the office at the end of question period, I will examine the report and let you know.
Supplementary?
Why, Mr. Attorney General, would you not table this report? Or does it depend on whether or not this report bears good or bad news?
Minister?
Tell the honourable member that things aren't being done the way they were when my honourable friend was in office.
Good point.
I made plain many months ago the policy we've adopted with respect to the release of reports. If, for example, in the case of any investigation, it is determined that a charge will be laid, it is not our practice to release reports for the very good reasons I think that I gave when last asked about this some months ago. I intend to examine the report, and then I will determine the course that I will take and advise my honourable friend.
New question? The member for Scarborough Centre knows that we go on rotation, and I will certainly recognize the member for the next question. For the next one in rotation. The new question, the member for Nickel Belt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the Minister of Labour concerning the death of Inco miner Dick Kerr at the Garson mine on August the 7th of this year. For several months prior to Mr. Kerr's death, the union, the local steelworkers, and my colleague from Sudbury East had been trying very hard to arrange a meeting with the Minister of Labour because of the large number of rock bursts in that area and in other areas as well. Could the Minister tell us why he refused to meet with the union?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, there appears to be some confusion, and I think there was some confusion on the part of some people. We did have a meeting, Mr. Speaker, with the president of Local 6500 and with the head of the health and safety unit at Local 6500, Mr. Sweezy. That meeting occurred on the same day that it was a breakfast meeting, and occurred on the same day that I was up to make a speech at Falconbridge. Mr. Speaker, I know that there may have been more formal applications from the union to meet in Toronto, but in essence, the matters that they wish to discuss in terms of having more ground control engineers were put to myself and the head of the mining safety branch and one of my assistants that day at breakfast, and action was taken.
Supplementary?
Given the gravity of the incident, that question was unworthy of answer was unworthy of any minister of the Crown. Since there had been a large number of rock bursts in that area where Mr. Kerr was working, and since just before his death, a matter of weeks, I believe, a huge scoop tram was buried by a rockfall, and since the company, Inco in this case, knew full well how dangerous that was and still sent Mr. Kerr to work there, would the minister assure us today that he will lay charges against Inco for sending a very special man to his death?
Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, I want to assure the honourable member and his colleagues from the Sudbury area, and indeed colleagues from the north, that we have moved to add additional ground control engineers because the government considers this matter quite seriously and understands the point that is being made. I should make this other point in terms of the Kerr fatality, which I agree with my friend is a real tragedy, and I believe that my friend from Nickel Belt knew Mr. Kerr personally. Mr. Speaker, it is, I think, inappropriate for a minister to order the laying of charges, because one then gets into the realm of political interference. I will assure my honourable friend that the matter of reviewing the facts of the case, the facts of the inquest, the background that the honourable gentleman has raised in the House will be carefully considered by senior officials of the ministry and officials of the legal branch, and that the appropriate action, if charges are the appropriate action, then charges will be laid.
New question, the member for Brampton.
Mr. Speaker, I have a rather large number of Southeast Asians in my community, and I try to meet with them on a regular basis. And some time ago, the Minister of Multiculturalism apparently went through this province conducting hearings. I'm asked on a fairly constant basis as to what the results of those hearings were and what they're either being used for or intended to be used for by the government. I direct that to the Minister of Citizenship and Culture.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, indeed, this ministry has embarked on a number of negotiations with communities relating to multicultural programs. And my colleague, the Honourable Tony Ruprecht, has embarked on a number of community dialogues across the province. If I can relate back to the question, the Southeast Asian community, for example, took part in a number of think tanks several months ago. And one of the questions raised in the think tank was, could they perhaps get together as a community to talk about development so that they could indeed feel that they were in control of their own lives. We therefore hosted a conference on the weekend, and it was called the South Asians in the 90s. But I should also say that the input received from think tanks, and the South Asian community was only one of them, the Caribbean community was another, the Mediterranean. That input is part and parcel of information we're currently analyzing as we work towards a revised multicultural policy.
New question, the member for Cochrane South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question to the Minister of Industry, Trade and Technology. I've seen news reports over the past 24 hours, and maybe the Minister can explain to the members of the legislature and the people of the province of Ontario the role of one Leo Gray in the Cumberland Group with respect to the WIDA investment in the Spectrum Semiconductor matter.
Minister?
I understand that he was connected to both WIDA and also the LSI applications, better known as Spectrum Limited, a very large loan that your government approved a few days before we took over the government.
No. Read that in the newspaper.
No,
Supplementary?
In fact, your government reviewed it and approved it.
Spot the difference.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. I want to know how often you and your staff and anyone else in that government, including the Premier, how often did you meet with Leo Gray on this matter?
Minister?
Just tell you that I believe the member is incorrect. It was approved by Cabinet and signed by the then Minister of Industry and Trade prior to us forming the government.
New question? Could the member for Brantford wait with his question? Well, that's not up to the Speaker. Order. New question, the member for Hamilton West.
Mr. Speaker, through you to the Attorney General of Ontario. We are reminded again, Mr. Attorney General, in the case of the enemy of Rambo Doll, how little protection minorities have in legislation in Ontario in cases of group defamation. The Minister of Labour yesterday, speaking with the press, said that in this instance it was not an offence under the Ontario Human Rights Code. Your ministry and yourself have been familiar with the Cohen reports, the McAlpine report, the more recent report by my colleague, our erstwhile colleague, Mr. Lawler, outlining a number of approaches to this question. Yet inquiries in your offices indicate that nothing is being done with regard to the suggestions from those reports. Will you tell the House whether you intend to act in any respect with regard to their suggestions or to take any other approach with regard to strengthening the position of Ontario legislation vis-a-vis group defamation?
Mr. Speaker, the answer to the group defamation problem, as the honourable member knows, is found in the answer to the class action problem. When some determination has been made about the circumstances in which classes of persons who are the victim of negligence or the victim of tort has been resolved, then we will have gone a long way to solve the group defamation problem. I can tell the honourable member that I have been looking at the class action problem. I do not anticipate that a solution will be available for this House before Mr. Justice Zuber presents his report on the structure of the courts in the late spring.
Supplementary?
Mr. Speaker, perhaps the Attorney General would share a little bit more with this House the problem of dealing with the class action question. The very sensitive report of Mr. Lawler laid out a number of quite precise possibilities that could be used by the Attorney General by, for example, adding to the early sections of the Ontario Human Rights Code the phrases "or class of persons," developing a new section that dealt with group defamation, which would precisely define the problem concerned, the possibility of using desist and cease and desist orders, and so on. I wonder if the Attorney General can tell us what the timetable might be and what the specific hold-up is and how much of a formidable obstacle it is to getting on with this very important task of providing protections in law for minorities in our province in these cases.
Minister.
Speaker, I know Mr. Lawler well, and I have high regard for him. I was not, I must frankly say, taken with the proposal in his report, which was in effect to turn the Human Rights Commission into a court for the purposes of awarding some of the remedies that courts have traditionally awarded in connection with libel and other torts. There are other remedies, and I think the appropriate course, as I've indicated to my friend, is to look at class actions, which should lead to a solution, because then it will be possible to develop a mechanism for group defamation, a carrier for the group defamation cause of action to the court. As I've indicated to my friend, the best timetable I can give him is the date I gave.
New question? The member for Carleton Grenville.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I have another question for the Attorney General. Mr. Attorney General, for the past few weeks you have been stating on many occasions that you're not responsible for laying charges. With regard to the investigation of the Solicitor General, who is going to make the decision either to prosecute or not prosecute the Solicitor General? Will it be you? Will it be the Metropolitan Toronto Police? Will it be the Ontario Provincial Police? Will it be the Cabinet of Ontario? Or will it be the Solicitor General himself?
As usual, it will be the police who will decide, an individual policeman, no doubt the one investigating the case, who will decide, taking what legal advice he wants, whether he has reasonable and probable grounds to lay an information and is prepared to give oath to that effect.
Supplementary.
So I assume from your answer that you are going to give him advice as to whether or not he should lay a charge. Well, why else would, if I was not to draw that assumption, why else would you get a copy of the investigation report?
Minister, that's a
No, as I've indicated to my friend on more than one occasion, and most recently last night at 6 o'clock, the police are entitled, before they lay an information, to request legal advice as to the legal sufficiency of the evidence they have obtained. There is, in some cases, that's a very simple matter, so simple that advice may not be required by the police. In other cases, it is a matter of very great complexity. I have no reason to believe that any different practice will be followed as a result of this investigation than is normal.
New question, the member for Welland Thorold.
My question is to the Minister of Financial Affairs. And say to the Minister, he must know by now, if he didn't know already, that the credit unions and the Caisse Populaires in this province are strongly opposed to your program for change, which you're trying to impose on them. You must also know by now that if proceeded with it, it can, in fact, your program can sink the weaker credit unions and Caisse Populaires and certainly damage even those strong credit unions. If it's not your intent to do that, will you now tell the House that you will extend the term to 10 or 12 years instead of 5 for building up the 5% reserve that you're requiring? And will you give the same kind of extension for the repayment of the $50 million or perhaps $70 million loan that you are forcing them to take?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the member's question because it gives me an opportunity to explain exactly what the program is and what it isn't. I should tell you that if you saw the provincial auditor's report, one of the major comments that he made in relationship to the Ministry of Financial Institutions is the concern that he has with the credit union movement. I should tell the honourable member that I have spent considerable time traveling to every area in this province, meeting with the credit union members to explain our program for change. I have said to them publicly and on many occasions that if they can't meet the 5-year deadline, if they can come up with a business plan that will extend it to 7, 10, or 12 years, we would certainly be responsive to that. The main concern that I have is that we have a system that has a deficit of about $80 million. We have provided a $50 million fund, and just so that there'll be some clarification, they don't have to take a penny of it if they don't want to. But it's available to them at reduced interest rates, and we did it as an accommodation to help them out of their problems. There are 800 credit unions in Ontario with assets of about $7 billion. We want to make sure that they stay strong. There's about 10 of them that could have a potential problem, and we're trying to resolve that problem.
Supplementary.
The minister must know, of course, that it has not been the credit unions during the last few years that have been a drain on the public purse. Rather, it has been the banks and the trust companies and the credit unions through mergers and other ways have not cost the province any, nor have they cost their membership anything. You say you've traveled the province, but you haven't listened fully to the objection that the credit unions have to your proposal. I would like to ask you, Mr. Minister, you have told them that they must borrow the $50 million from a private bank. Why can they not borrow it out of their own system when Credit Union Central has something like $850 million on deposit? And will you give some assurance that that staff, which have done so well in rehabilitating the credit unions and are under Credit Union Central, will continue to do the rehabilitation work, whether it continues under the Credit Union Central or is under OSNC?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if I could tell the honourable member that at the present time, the credit union system has a deficit of about $80 million. Of that $80 million, they don't have a surplus. They have a deficit in the system of $80 million. Of that $80 million, $30 million of it is being handled by the stabilization funds. $50 million is not. Now, what we are suggesting, and they have made the proposal to me that why don't we borrow it internally, and the reason I have denied that is because that's really creative accounting, and they're using cash flow to finance their debt. Central alone has a debt of $10 million. How could they lend any money to anyone unless they're using cash flow? And what we're trying to do is we're trying to stabilize those 10%, and I want to emphasize, most of the credit unions in Ontario are doing very well. We have about 10% of them that are potential problems. The member will know that in Alberta, the credit union system has a deficit of $300 million. What we're trying to do is we're trying to stabilize the credit union system. I am totally committed to the credit union system. We want to make sure it works. But those that are in trouble, we want to help.
Great answer. New question, the Leader of the Opposition.
I have a question for the Attorney General. I heard the response he offered my colleague a moment ago on the matter of the Keys investigation. I want to remind the Attorney General that the police did not seek your advice in this matter before they laid charges. The police did not approach you for legal advice or any guidance whatsoever. The only reason you have inserted yourself in this is because you contacted the police and asked them to do an investigation and report back to you. Now, you do not insert yourself in the matter of a situation if an average citizen has been found in the circumstances alleged by which involved the Solicitor General. In that case, the police investigate and they decide, in accordance with what you've been telling us for days now, the police decide whether to lay charges. My question to the Attorney General is this. Notwithstanding the answer you gave my colleague a moment ago, why would you not simply have contacted the police and said, here's the situation I want you to investigate, and if you decide charges are appropriate, you lay the charges? That should have been the normal procedure. They should not be reporting back to you.
That's right. Well, I requested an investigation to be conducted because this was a case where, for whatever reason, no investigation occurred at the time of the offense. There was no investigation occurred, and as a result, we were confronted because of the fact that the Solicitor General, very honorably, had given a full account of what happened when he entertained the head of Scotland Yard on the boat. I asked the police to investigate, which, it now being some months after, they would not ordinarily have done. They have today delivered a report to my department of their investigation. I don't see anything inappropriate in that.
Supplementary?
Let me say to the attorney, the time at which the alleged offense occurred is irrelevant. If you thought you wanted the police to investigate after we raised the matter in the House, then your appropriate directions, given the evidence you've been giving to this House for several weeks, is to contact the police and say information has been brought to my attention that an offense may have been committed by the Solicitor General of this province. Will you investigate? That is to the police force. Will you investigate? And if you think it's appropriate, lay charges. Under no circumstances should you as Attorney General have inserted yourself between the police investigation and the decision as to whether to lay charges against one of your colleagues, the Solicitor General, no less, or not. That is the degree to which the Attorney General has compromised himself and his responsibilities to cover up a political situation in his government. Therefore, I ask the Attorney General to explain to this House why it is that he would not simply, in accordance with his advice to this House, have called the police and said, investigate the Solicitor General, and if you think charges should be laid, lay charges.
Well, why it is that I take a different view of my responsibilities than the honourable member does. He thinks one thing should be done, I think another thing should be done. And I point out this. I think this is worth noting. The office of Attorney General is the one job in government in which I've got more experience than the honourable member.
Order. Point of order.
Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Technology indicated that the LSI investment decision was not subject to review. On June the 28th, 1985, it was clearly indicated in a report in the Globe and Mail that it was a decision subject to review. That's in accordance with the statements of the Treasurer and the Premier of the day.
Order. It's not a point of order. It's a point of view. New question. New question. The member for Scarborough-Ellesmere.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am standing up, in case you're wondering. I have a question for the Minister of Labor. The Minister is aware that just a short while ago, General Motors laid off approximately 1,300 workers at its Scarborough van plant. You should be now aware that General Motors has issued an overtime call to every one of the remaining 1,300 workers for every Saturday, starting this Saturday, indefinitely. I wonder what response the workers can expect from the minister in order to help those workers who were put on indefinite layoff while the company uses overtime with the remaining employees.
Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman would know that while the company may have asked for an amount of overtime and work on Saturdays for an indefinite period of time, that indefinite period of time could be a very long period of time, could be a very short period of time. The honourable member will also know that the honourable member will also know that the overtime will, as I would gather, will bring the period of time of work each week for each of those employees to 48 hours, which does not extend beyond the standards now appropriate in the Employment Standards Act. Mr. Speaker, there is a task force. There is a task force which has been examining this important matter for a long period of time, for almost a year now. The research director of the United Auto Workers Union was one of the 5 members of that task force, and I await with some interest the report of that task force.
Supplementary, the member for Scarborough-Ellesmere.
As usual, the response of the minister indicates that the effort on behalf of the government is about as swift as a centipede with fallen arches. The minister knows that one of the causes of this problem is the fact that we do not yet have, in 1986, in the province of Ontario, a 40-hour work week. When are you going to bring in a 40-hour work week for the province of Ontario?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker.
At that height of the fallen arches. Right down there.
Mr. Speaker, whatever amendments are appropriate to the Employment Standards Act and to the hours of work provisions of that act will be brought forward once a task force, which is made up of a group of individuals from both labor and industry, chaired by Arthur Donner, can offer solutions which we hope will take this very important matter of employment standards not only through the rest of the 80s but into the 1990s. There is no doubt, Mr. Speaker, that a provision of the Act, which was more than 4 decades old, very clearly needed to be updated and needed to be studied. That matter has been underway for some time. Mr. Speaker, I regret that obviously these things take time, but when we make these changes, I would rather do it correctly. Clearly, these issues are very complex, and these solutions are not as simple as my friends over on that side of the House would have us believe. They always believe, Mr. Speaker, that the solutions are simple, and they rarely are.
New question. Order. The member for Burlington South. New question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Labor. Now that
government inaction on Sunday shopping is creating chaos in the retail marketplace, and employees in Ontario, retail employees, are expressing concern about their job security. I want to ask the Minister a question about the fact that yesterday the Bay stores announced that they will be opening on Sundays. And they announced that to their employees. One employee called me this morning, a Mrs. Susan Lenton, who works at the Oakville Bay, and she was told that she must work on the Sunday, and that if she didn't, she was advised, and I'll quote, "If you can't adapt, you're in the wrong business." My question to the Minister, will you call the Bay stores and investigate this matter?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, if the honourable gentleman wishes to send over the details, we'll get in touch with the honourable member's constituent. But it should be very clear. It should be very clear that under the under the Act, Mr. Speaker, under the Act, it is illegal. It is illegal not only for those stores to open, but it is illegal for those employees to work. And as the Attorney General has pointed out, we do not believe there will be one job lost out of this, and I want to indicate to the House that those companies who are contemplating ignoring the laws of Ontario should understand that their employees should not be asked to take the kinds of actions that they're contemplating doing themselves.
Supplementary.
I'm pleased that the Minister is interested enough in the details, and you'll have those. You've just gotten them in my question. And I suspect then that tomorrow you can advise this House, specifically of your conversation with the Bay stores and what you were able to perform. My final question, my supplementary, is what about the thousands of other retail employees in Ontario? What are you going to be doing for them?
Minister?
Well, I think I already just provided the answer to the honourable member. You know, it is, Mr. Speaker, it's an unfortunate situation that we're in. We're in a situation, oh, quiet down for a minute. Quiet down for a minute. If you've got a question, you ask it. Mr. Speaker, we're in a situation, Mr. Speaker, where regrettably a number of retail companies have chosen to ignore the laws of Ontario. And as a result of their decision, we are now into a very difficult situation. We are attempting to deal with it as appropriately as we can, and I can indicate.
Order. I'd like to tell the member for Scarborough Centre that the member for Sudbury East many times has said that verbal cross-checking is out of order in this arena. Right? New question, the member for Algoma.
East is an example.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the absence of the Minister of Health, I'd like to direct a question to the Minister of Northern Development and Mines, the Premier, with regard to the difficulty of attracting healthcare professionals to Northern Ontario. The Premier will be aware that despite the efforts of the Ministry of Health and the St. Joseph General Hospital in Elliott Lake and the medical profession in Elliott Lake, as of December the 15th, there will no longer be any anesthetist in that community, which will mean that in emergencies, whether it be a mine accident or an automobile accident or perhaps an emergency cesarean section, as there was one last week, the patient will have to be transferred probably to Sault Ste. Marie or Sudbury. Can the Premier indicate what is being done by this government to ensure that we do not have to continue to be dependent on locums only for communities like Elliott Lake, and what is being done to assist in perhaps attracting other doctors, whether it be foreign doctors or whatever, who are prepared to emigrate to this province to operate and practice in the north?
Speaker, I'm very much aware of the problem the honourable member mentions, and he's quite, I believe, right in his facts. It is my understanding that 2 or 3 days a week, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, the anesthetist is coming in from Peterborough, I believe, but that doesn't take care of the problem he raises of emergency surgery. The ministry is aware of the problem. They are trying to attract someone there, and I unfortunately can offer you no instant solutions at the moment except the solutions that my honourable friend is aware of. It is a problem in other communities in Northern Ontario as well. We are exploring his suggestion, and it's something we've mentioned before, with respect to foreign-trained doctors. But you're aware, I'm sure, that that would not solve the immediate problem. Frequently, those people are not specialists, and what we really need in Northern Ontario as opposed to the general practitioner, although there are some individual problems in that regard. I can assure you the minister is working actively on the problem. There is nothing I can tell you today to say that we have solved the problem, but I'm sure we're prepared to share with you the information as it develops.
Supplementary.
I appreciate the Premier's response, but in this particular case, we could be training more general practitioners to be able to administer anesthetics. Could the Premier explain why his government cut the funding for anesthesia training in this province so that there are 6 fewer anesthetists graduating each year? And what he will do to increase the funding to medical schools to train more GPs to administer anesthetics so that they can practice in the smaller communities, and so that we won't be just dependent on luck in the case of an emergency cesarean like we were last week.
Good question. Well, Mr. Speaker, to the honourable gentleman, you'll be aware that the problem is not the number of trained professionals, it's the distribution of trained professionals. I mean, theoretically, we could train 20 more anesthetists in Southern Ontario, but that doesn't mean they're going to go to Elliott Lake and practice or wherever else they're required in Northern Ontario. So the question is developing programs or some contractual arrangement whereby they agree to practice in certain designated areas. Now, there's a variety of, there is a program, as you know, that's been in the government for some time to attract people to those areas, and we're continuing to do that, to work on that. There has been the suggestions also with respect to foreign-trained doctors. But as I say to my honourable friend, it's not just a question of training more healthcare professionals, because what we do find is in Southern Ontario, and particularly some of the areas in the south, that we have more doctors, a higher doctor-patient ratio than is, say, necessary or required by or suggested by the World Health Organization, except we have the exact opposite in Northern Ontario. And that's a question of attracting them to those areas. It's something that's concerned me for a long time. I don't have the instant answer to my honourable friend, and I apologize for that, but we'll certainly work very hard with him and the community to get the appropriate person in Elliott Lake.
Time for oral questions has expired. Petitions. Point of privilege.
Mr. Speaker, last night at 6 o'clock, this House took a vote on Section 18 of Bill 7. At that time, I asked the chairman of the committee to allow the House to have a recorded vote. The House leader, the government House leader, denied the unanimous consent, Mr. Speaker, to have a recorded vote on that particular section of Bill 7. Shame. I want to bring it to your attention, sir, and to the attention of all members of the House, that through the courtesy of the Toronto Star and the Globe and Mail, they have today printed all those people who have voted for that section of the bill and all those who have voted against, and they've also listed those who were absent. So it's there. If we would like it, it's in the paper today.
I was just trying to understand the member on that point of privilege. I believe it was a vote of thanks on your behalf to the Globe and Mail, if I'm not mistaken. Certainly wasn't a point of privilege.